And hospital porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV. Now this is a lovely picture here because this is done by Richard. Alien mutilation. It's an animal getting their own back.
I thought it was about time after all the gruesome pictures we've seen yesterday. I was inspired to do a bit of art.
I mean, the majority of yesterday's performance. I mean, the main speakers of the day. There was a whole series of lectures about a very, very unusual and one of the most inexplicable, most widespread, and most disturbing elements in the entire of all of ufology, which is the animal mutilations.
Yeah, when we talk about animal mutilations, and people talk about where's the evidence for like UFOs and strange goings on. Animal mutilations is probably one of the best tested bits of evidence there is, because I've yet to find somebody who can explain it through rational terms.
Yeah, I mean, animals do obviously get killed on farms, and wild animals get killed. They get attacked by predators. They get sometimes stupid people break into farms and kill them. But these are different. These injuries,
Yeah,
the injuries they suffer and the way they die is very different.
Let's start with like the predators. If a predator gets hold of an animal, you'll see. Like let's say if a wolf gets hold of a sheep, you'll see bits of the sheep from one side of the field to the other side of the field, wool, blood, everything everywhere. These mutilations.
Most of the meat will be eaten as well.
Yeah,
whereas
they don't have any blood, any tracks, no prevailing marks to say like people have been there. Like say there's no signs of lorries, no signs of vans, no signs of footprints, nothing. Just strange mutilations to animals.
Common, and they look like surgically precise removals of certain parts of the body.
Yeah, it's like it's been cauterized where they've been cut. It's like been burned very neatly into like well, it looks like skin, like it's meant to be there, kind of thing.
Common pieces of the body removed are the flesh of the jaw. For some reason it's the left side, the eye, pieces of the throat, ears removed,
internal organs.
Yeah.
Rectal core, which is my least favourite one.
Taking out the rectum and all the genitalia.
Who'd want rectums?
Well, I know. I mean, and also very often the internal organs. Some of the internal organs are removed, the digestive tract, the livers and stuff. But there's no sign of anything on the surface except there's very, very small, very neatly cut, sort of like incisions through the body cavity.
Teardrop-shaped holes, which all the internal organs have been extracted out of. One of the interesting cases, Mike Freebury, he was actually watched a film called The Silent Killers by Richard D. Hall. It featured the Animal Pathology Field Unit, which consists of David Caton, Mike Freebury, and David Hoyle.
David Hoyle. They started with Richard. Richard started with showing his film. Then Mike Freebury came on and discussed his own investigations of a series of cases on Dartmoor, and this is pretty widespread everywhere. I mean, not just in Britain but across the world. I mean, they've even
back in 1977, Mike Freebury, he looked at the Dartmoor ponies case, where I think 15 ponies were found absolutely mutilated, and what Mike Freebury did, he filed a number of Freedom of Information Act requests, which got denied. Then eventually 3 years later he got the photographs that he wanted, and but unfortunately he wasn't allowed to publish them, he wasn't allowed to show them, and there's a whole list of kind of rules that came with this Freedom of Information Act photograph.
They were trumped up excuses, that's what they were. I mean, one of the things that's common here is like DEFRA, that's the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
Which is,
it's actually, there is no doubt that it is trying to thwart investigations into this subject.
Oh, definitely. They're being very, very awkward when it comes to answering questions. Richard D. Hall did an investigation that just sent him round and round in a circle from pillar to post.
They'll come up with all kinds of trumped up excuses to prevent people getting hold of photographs, pathology reports and things like this. The reason why I think this is going on is because it is a global affair. I mean, it first came to public attention by Linda Moulton Howe in the 1970s. She made some films and wrote a book about it in what was going on in America. But it was happening in Britain. I mean, the earliest recorded case in Britain is 1954, and it's happening in other countries. There's a man who unintentionally, he was part of a BBC documentary in the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan, which, as you know, I have a special affection for, came across a yak, which he claimed was... They were looking for evidence of tigers being alive in that area where they're thought to be extinct. And they came across a yak that looked like it had suffered these injuries.
Yeah.
You know, it's weird.
And the guy was going, look, this is one of the tooth marks, and it was a round hole, went 5.5 inches in, which apparently is a very it's a very common depth for some of these incisions, about 5.5 inches, and he was sticking, going, look, this is one of the teeth marks. Obviously, David Caton came and said, well, where's the other bloody tooth mark?
Well, one of the reasons I think that the government may not want people investigating this is because there is an association with UFO activity. People see these things at the same time as very often these things occur during UFO sightings. I mean, there is definitely a correlation. I mean, not only animal disappearances too.
Yeah, well,
amazingly, was it just only a few months ago? Was it 1,500 sheep just vanished from a field in Lincolnshire?
Absolutely, in a place called Stenegot near Louth in North Lincolnshire. There's like a UFO triangle between Louth, Mablethorpe, and I think it's a place called Alford. And it's also where you might remember there was a wind turbine that an UFO crashed into. I've drew an illustration.
Rich has been illustrating his notes here.
Yeah.
UFO crashing wind turbine.
But yeah, it's that kind of area, and like you said, 1,500 sheep gone, no trace. No sign of forced entry. They arrested 3 people: the shepherd's father, and the shepherd's wife. Sounds like a bad film, doesn't it? And they've all been released without charge. However, the BBC failed to report that they'd been released without charge. It was, oh yes, we've apprehended them. Yeah. And they never said anything more about the investigation when it was 1,500 sheep.
It sounds like to me like the police basically, in the absence of a proper suspect, they just brought in the people they thought were most likely to be involved, which of course was the shepherd of the fields.
Well, Richard D. Hall did an investigation, and he spoke to the policeman in charge, and the policeman in charge, due to a couple of phone calls, he sounded absolutely clueless. He was kind of saying to Richard D. Hall, "Really, have you got some theories? I'm dying to hear
policeman
them."
Kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, one thing that's obvious is like this has been blamed on rustlers. I mean, even though the police have released their only suspects, they're still saying this was obviously done by rustlers with sheepdogs and lorries. Thing is, though, you need at least 3 large livestock haulers to remove 1,500 sheep, and it'd be very, very difficult to do it discreetly. I mean, there was a farmhouse nearby. They didn't hear a thing. Their dogs weren't alerted.
They didn't, and they had what they described as special branch come to speak to them.
Special branch, just for sheep?
Yeah, just to ask if they'd seen anything. I mean, these sheep, like I said, they were 1,500 quid. They belonged to a wealthy landowner, and but even he was perplexed. He's installed cameras around his field and everything now.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
See if he can catch anything.
But there's no... You see, the gates to the field was locked. There was no sign of tyre tracks, which of course road haulers would leave. There was no sign of footprints from the sheepdogs or from the sheep themselves.
And there was only one way in and one way out. There was no sign of disturbance. There was no muck on the ground. There was no wool, which you'd expect with 1,500 sheep going through one gate, which was... I mean, the gate must have been the length of one of these beds. Like I say, it had a rusty old lock on, which looked like it hadn't been disturbed for about 10 years.
It's really, this is really awful. I mean, Richard D. Hall, David Caton and Mike Freeby list these various cases which are, like I said, very disturbing. I mean, but there's definitely a very strange element to it. And I'll give you some examples. For instance, I mean, as I said, animals do get attacked and killed in other ways, either by stupid humans or by predators. And usually within hours, if these animals are not picked up by the farmer, within a couple of days, they'll be completely devoured by scavengers. The foxes, crows and other scavenging creatures will devour the corpse. In this case, not only was whatever killed the animal left the meat, as I explained, but the scavengers will not touch the corpse. Even flies won't land on it. They will not. Animals, these scavenging animals will leave it well alone. They're really frightened of it, and for some reason, and very often you get unusual decomposition. Now, Kate and Hall and Freebury didn't mention this yesterday, but you do get unusual decomposition. Firstly, one of the things is sometimes it will decompose very quickly within a couple of days. Even in cold weather, it will just dissolve. The corpse will just dissolve. This happened Linda Moulton Howard talks about this. Another is the opposite. Sometimes the corpse somehow becomes kind of mummified. Even in very warm, wet weather, it'll become dry. It'll dry out and become mummified, which is very strange. But you often get, as I said, UFO activity is often seen around these events, and also in the soil around where the animal is left, you'll find horseshoe-shaped markings and signs that the soil has been heated up. Now, we've seen this with crop circles as well, and that is a very, very strange phenomenon. Sometimes the effects can be seen years later in the ground.
Yeah, it's like the ground's baked hard. Sometimes it's almost like ceramic. It's completely sterile. So you've got to imagine something, I'd say in excess of about 300-400 degrees C has actually landed on there to kind of bake the soil that hard. Another thing which absolutely appalled us about it was the seal mutilations.
Oh, good grief. Yeah, as we say, wild animals are sometimes affected too. And what we've had lately in Norfolk, in St Andrews in Scotland, and also in the Stanford Lock in Northern Ireland, we've had terrible. I mean, you've drawn a picture of the injuries these seals have suffered.
Yeah, it's not a very good illustration, unfortunately, but it's like a clockwise spiral that goes round the body, so it comes round the body.
It's taking the skin off and the blubber.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the anal coring, and there's the jaws being stripped, the skull and the tongue being removed, and all the things we see with the farm animals.
The point you moved to about the seals, what was so extraordinary is they'd all been chopped at exactly the same vertebrae. Now, I challenge any of your viewers to go out and try and actually catch a seal.
Well,
to hold it in position, to actually get your blade up and chop it in the same bit of vertebrae every single time. I think it was it 30 seals that were chopped in exactly the same bit of vertebrae. Now, like I say, catching a seal it's no mean feat.
Yeah, I mean, there's this is thing. I mean, this is very upsetting. I mean, seals are one of my favourite animals, and I think they're very popular animals generally with people. And you know, this wasn't a lecture you could really bring the kids along to, was it? It was very disturbing.
It's had some very disturbing photographs.
But definitely adult material. This.
Oh yeah.
It's I mean, the thing is, the reaction from the authorities has been, as I said, they've been mute and they've been very, very, very evasive. Yeah, but also the media has made a joke of it. There was an article in the Sun which was called,
Bars Attack.
Bars Attack, when it's for sheep to shoot sheep.
Yeah, and this was after Richard D. Hall. He wrote to his MP, and he wrote to his MP again. Like he sent him a copy of his film Silent Killers, which, again, I say to anybody, it's terrific evidence. If you want to show it to some skeptics, I'd like to hear any explanations of it. But Richard D. Hall, he did an investigation, sent a copy to his MP. His MP actually bought it up in Parliament, and then he bought it up again in Parliament. And I think it was 2 weeks later, this Bars Attack thing was in the Sun, and I think the Telegraph Online mentioned something about it as well.
But this article, Bars Attack, didn't feature any of the evidence that Richard had posed. None of it at all. No, they left out all the really convincing parts.
It trivialised the whole matter, as the Sun would, you know.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, we've already said. I mean, this is obviously one of the most disturbing and upsetting elements of the ufology and the UFO phenomenon, but it's also one of the most widespread and has the strongest evidence. One thing is clear here, and I think Richard would agree, I expect, is that we're nowhere near finding an answer to this. There is none of the theories about who's doing this and why make any sense.
I heard a theory touted, and it was over the pond in America. I forgot who actually said it. Some of your viewers might have heard it before. And that was somebody asked about it, and either the military or the police asked the military about it, and he said that the best answer I can give you is it's a genetic harvest.
That still doesn't quite fit. I mean, to get genetic material, you just need to take a bit of skin off somebody.
Yeah, maybe they need loads of genetic material. Another thing, particularly not so much with the mutilations, but the disappearance of the animals. I know you can grow antibodies and stuff inside of animals.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why they're getting used. And I mean, that's just one possible theory. Another possible theory they talked about was that that they've been taken for food.
Richard was saying this because the UFO had been spotted very, very close in the same month nearby, and as we said, UFO activity is linked to this. What did Richard said? Something about, was it underground bases?
Possibly they've been taken all to feed troops and stuff in underground bases, but like I say, that's just a theory. But I mean, I think I can discount that, because if they wanted to do that, they wouldn't arouse suspicion by abducting sheep. They'd just go to a cattle market and
well, exactly,
maybe purchase them. So yeah,
this is the strange thing. Why are they? I mean, this is the strange thing. I mean, as we said, the theories are, firstly, it's alien related, and the aliens are coming down for whatever reason. They're taking these creatures and doing these things to them, and they're leaving the bodies behind. Another theory, because this is in all government. I mean, there's one theorist in America who said that, it's just helicopters. They look like aliens, but they're helicopters. The government pick them up, they take them away, do their experiments, and they put them back. But firstly, as you say, this arouses suspicion. If the government were doing this, it arouses suspicion.
You just go to do an animal lab or a farm and just say, can I buy a couple of sheep?
Exactly. Secondly,
arouse any suspicion?
Secondly, I mean, sheep are actually, if you want to get hold of farm animals, there's easier ways of doing it than simply flying into the middle of a field and picking them up in front of, lots of, under the noses of very curious people. You can just go get hold of them through the normal channels. I mean, when I was a porter at the hospital, I remember somebody used to deliver sheep carcasses in big boxes, and I used to have to take them to the various laboratories in the hospital. I mean, the hospital didn't go out and nick them in from some field in the middle of the night and dump the bodies behind. And then Nick Cook, this guy who's very interesting in a way, because he's very mainstream and straight, but you get the feeling he's forced into this idea that there may be anti-gravity and stuff like this, but he discounts all this UFO. Whenever he mentions the extraterrestrial hypothesis in his videos, which are worth watching, by the way, he always discounts it with the usual comprehensively discredited stuff.
Swamp gas that killed these animals.
What he does is he dresses in one scene in one of his films. I think it's the $1 Billion Secret, or it's one of these other films. He has a guy talking about mutilation, and he has just one scene which is just a few minutes long. He says, well, basically, it's the government. I can't do his voice. It's the government doing it, and they just put the bodies back because they want to take the piss out of people. Basically, they want to have a good laugh at the farmers. It just makes no sense at all. And Nick Cook, you really should know better than to come out with crap like that.
Well, with the disappearance of 1,500 sheep, the key points that he put up at the end were really revealing. There was no suspects, there was no evidence of insurance fraud, there was no physical evidence, there was no witnesses, the field was padlocked and undisturbed, and there was a huge UFO spotted earlier that month.
Yeah, so I think the real suspect is probably the big silver ovoid that was seen hovering over a road nearby a few weeks before.
Absolutely.
I think I'd want to go and arrest that rather than arrest the...
Calling all cars.
I mean, I think this subject culminated, which Richard brought the subject up in. Luckily, it's very, very rare, but among the species taken and treated in this way includes Homo sapiens.
Yes,
there are a few cases. There's one in Brazil, which Richard mentioned, didn't he?
Mutilation, yeah. And if you really want to see the pictures done at the end of Silent Killers, they're absolutely gruesome.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it didn't bother me. I'm an ex-hospital porter, so nothing bothers me like that. But don't look at them unless you.
He had the jaw strip. His genitals had been removed. He had a rectal cause. Internal organs had been taken. And Richard says at the end of his film that he's got it on some good authority that there's been cases in the UK.
Yes, I heard there was a cases. I mean, it was dismissed. It was covered up. People said they were dumping clothes shop dummies, but there was a case of multiple human mutilation case in the USA. There's also a case in Russia. Very, very interesting case of a man who went walking in the woods, and literally just a couple of hours later, people went looking for him, and they found him in that state, dead. So, well, that was basically the bulk of the Saturday lectures were taken up by this subject. It's now Sunday morning. I think we've got to head back to the venue now from our lovely little room here near Sefton Park, Liverpool. And have we got to go and see Gary? Is it Gary Heseltine?
Yeah, Gary Heseltine is going to start this morning.
You've got your blue thing. That's good. I've got to go and get mine.
Got me banned.
That's our Sunday day pass. Well, HPANWO TV viewers, we'll see you later. I'll let you know how we get on. Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order.